Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for July 31st, 2016. Here is a look at the visible satellite animation of Invest Area 97L. You can see some decent banding trying to develop here, bringing some fairly squally weather to portions of the Northeast Caribbean islands. There might be an area of vorticity maximum or an area where the low-level center is trying to form. Somewhere here south of Puerto Rico, seen some mentions of that on social media this afternoon. Overall, convection is trying to consolidate as well, but it is still an open wave of low pressure, just a sharp trough in the trade winds down here. Here's another area. You can see sort of broad turning with this system here. These tropical waves of energy come off of Africa, and they move across the Atlantic 3 or 4 days apart. And look at this graphic here I found out on Wikipedia. They start as far east as Sudan, actually off the picture here, and they move across in the trade winds, pushed off by what we call the African easterly jet, and they get pushed into the Atlantic basin. Sometimes they bring a Saharan air layer behind them, sometimes they come out in front of one. I mean, it's just, an interesting phenomenon that's been around for as long as the ocean has been wide enough to sort of accept these features and let them grow, and that Africa has been there. And they're really just little elongated areas of low pressure in the atmosphere that come off. They have a trough axis. So instead of like a trough over the mid-latitudes like you see during the winter, these are the other way. They're sort of inverted troughs, little seedlings of energy that come off of Africa and travel across the Atlantic. Sometimes they end up in the eastern Pacific, where they develop into something there, and maybe even go farther west over to the western Pacific. So basically, tropical waves are just these little seedlings that come along, and you get about 100 of them per year, and maybe 6 out of those 100 develop into a hurricane, for example. Now, our system today, 97L, located right in here, and the overall envelope of energy kind of taking up this area. So it's getting into the moderate upper ocean heat content zone, and this will continue to move off to the west and west-northwest with time, getting into warmer and warmer sea surface temperatures. And going back to the satellite picture, some of these squalls through here certainly bringing very heavy rain, and that's going to pass over portions of Hispaniola and then Jamaica, where, according to some folks on YouTube that we've been interacting with, you could use the rainfall. So as long as it's not too much of a good thing in too short a period of time, like what we saw in Maryland last night. That was scary, flash flooding up in the Baltimore area. Well, Jamaica has some mountainous terrain, very tropical down there, and this system probably going to bring some very heavy rain over the next few days, so just be mindful of that as the wave passes through. And again, these upper ocean heat content values really start to increase, and if the shear relaxes enough or stays favorable, it seems to be favorable enough right now, this should go on to develop into perhaps a tropical storm. Now, I wanted to show you the different model plots. This is the GFS ensemble plot from the 12 UTC package today, and basically it's a whole bunch of different runs of the GFS model with slightly different variables to give a slightly different output. And the main thing I want to point out, for the most part, you look at this very compact envelope here of tracks towards Central America. You don't have, for example, some of them going up here or something bending off, heading out to sea or down into the Costa Rica-Panama area. This is a fairly compact envelope of guidance right towards Central America. Honduras, Belize, perhaps, and certainly overall it looks like the Yucatan would be in play for whatever develops from this system. If we look at the intensity guidance, again, looking at the overall package for the near term, fairly consistent for several of the models for this to strengthen, perhaps into a hurricane. Some of them, not so enthusiastic, if you will, until later. So there is a little bit more spread in the guidance with the intensity forecast as compared to the track forecast. And this is a different look at the track forecast at the various models from example here. This is the AEMI is like the GFS ensemble mean, and these are your consensus models in here. Instead of getting into what each of these in particular stands for, again, look at the overall envelope here. The north side and the south side, fairly compact with a general trajectory towards the Yucatan, staying, for the most part, south of 20 degrees latitude in here. And for example, Brownsville, Texas is around 26 north. Miami, Florida, 25 and some change north, for example. So, this is going to stay fairly low latitude. And that's not surprising this time of year. I'll show you why in just a moment. Looking at a different perspective, again, a satellite product, but this shows the vorticity signature. And look how round it's starting to look, with maybe a maximum area of vorticity right in here. And let's go back one more time and look at that satellite animation. That's what that looks like in the satellite picture. Nice and round, which is what you look for in a developing system. And if you examine it, almost like an X-ray, seeing through to the bones of the system, if you will. Not the same thing, but that's the analogy I'm going with here. The round appearance to it shows that it is developing. Contrast that to the area out here in the open Atlantic. This used to be 96L, and this hasn't gone away, by the way. It's still here. All of these yellows, as elongated as they are, and some oranges in there, do represent vorticity or spin or energy in the atmosphere. It's just that 97L here is more round in its appearance, and so probably better organized. And you can see that on the GFS. This is from the 12Z run today, and this is valid roughly this evening, a few hours from now when I'm recording this video. And there's the vorticity signature south of Puerto Rico, which is right there. There's Jamaica, and here of course is Honduras, Belize, and parts of the Yucatan. So watch as I go through the different frames here. So again, this is valid Sunday evening, July 31st. This will be valid tomorrow morning, Monday, August 1st. Notice that it's still kind of small and oblong shaped. It's not perfectly round, so it's not quite organizing yet. We're going to jump ahead now to 72 hours. So this will be valid on Wednesday morning. Here it is just off the coast of Honduras. And this is important to note because you can tell high pressure here. This is an outline, these different thicknesses in the atmosphere. Think of the atmosphere as having mountains and valleys, these big mountains of air, these areas of high pressure. The system just can't go into this. This is more dense of an air mass up here than this is. So you think about it, this is like a very dense water balloon, and this is maybe a less dense and smaller water balloon, so it just can't penetrate through it. And the overall stream flow, as you just follow these different wind barbs, is generally towards Central America here, not up towards the Gulf of Mexico or the East Coast or even the western Gulf of Mexico, for example, where Texas is. Moving on out to day 5, I believe this is. Nope, sorry, 96 hours. Kind of gets buried here over Belize. Again, not very well organized in the model. So if it's going to take this track, from roughly here today all the way over to here in 4 days, then it's going to have to develop somewhere along the way before it starts running into land if it's going to become a tropical storm. Now this is 96 hours out. If we go back to the intensity plot, 96 hours is right in here, and there's the land interaction that some of the models are probably seeing. So between now and, let's just call it 72 hours, it does have a window here to strengthen, perhaps even to a hurricane, according to some of the models. And going back one more time to the upper ocean heat content map, yep, it would be crossing some of that very, very warm water in here, that upper ocean heat content very high. So as we see on the GFS, just one of several models, but I think it's got a pretty good handle on this overall. Mainly the steering pattern, that this big ridge of high pressure here basically going to keep this shoved down into Central America and eventually the west side of the Bay of Campeche, if this ever pops out on the other side of the landmass at all. It could just go across and end up dying out or going into the eastern Pacific. So you see, these things are never easy to figure out. There's never a straightforward track solution that you can hang your hat on 5 to 7 days out. It's just too complicated, even with today's computer modeling technology. So we'll keep an eye on it as it cruises through the Caribbean. Again, if you're in the Greater Antilles, and then, of course, Jamaica, the Caymans, and then eventually Central America, heavy rainfall, squally weather headed your way, maybe more. We will see in the coming days. All right? Well, that's it for me for this afternoon. Thanks for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow.